Hi, I'm Alex, and welcome back to the Boathouse Paddle series where we talk about everything concerning paddle. Today, we're going to talk about the changes to paddle's AUP recently, the acceptable use policy, which governs which products you can sell with paddle, which paddle sells on your behalf, and that is the issue here. They are taking on risk when they accept you as a vendor because they're reselling your product. So they need to make sure that their rules not only protect them as paddle, but they are also protecting all the other vendors on the platform at the same time. Now, up until this change, it was a fairly simple distinction if you could go and use paddle. It was if you are a digital product or a digital service, most likely you'd be accepted. Of course, there's illegal content that they won't accept in any way, but in general, human services weren't allowed, physical services weren't, or physical products weren't allowed, simply because the tax handling there gets complicated, and also a matter of, okay, they are the merchant of record, but if you're sending out the products, the physical products, things get murky. So it was fairly simple to say if you're a SaaS software, most likely you'd be accepted. Now, the recent change is they don't accept products or software or digital services that use AI generated images. Now, they've clarified in their AUP it's face swaps, deepfake images, videos, or voice impersonations, but in the recent Paddle Forward event, they generalized this to AI generated images that don't have a certain level of checks implemented on how users use that service. And this is basically to say they can't have products on the platform that don't guarantee that the usage, for example, for the image generation is not illicit or against the terms and services of the payment providers that Paddle themselves use and have to adhere to. Basically, they're saying this is too much risk for them to accept those in, and they're guarding all the other vendors on the platform from that risk as well. It's not just that Paddle's saying, okay, no, we don't want that, that's too risky. As a Paddle vendor, I also don't want them to suddenly lose their payment methods, their payment providers. So this and the other things that are forbidden in the AUP are most likely down to payment service provider rules, specifically the card networks. And this is Visa and MasterCard. Why do I say that? Well, if we have a look at sort of history, we can see this article, I think, is from 2021. Yeah, 2021. Just says that MasterCard is introducing new rules. And here you can see this was already 3 or 4 years ago. And they say all content, and this is the new rules are about user-generated content here, but all content must be reviewed prior to publication or in real time if it's live streamed, and you can't violate the card brand business or risk assessment. So if you just apply this further down the line, AI generated image is strictly speaking user generated. You're prompting it to do that. And if the service, if the product doesn't have some form of regulation or some kind of mechanism to check that you're not using it for illicit purposes, then it's a too high risk for the platform. And it's also a reason why, if we look a bit further back in the AUP of Paddle, you can actually see that they used to forbid cyber lockers. Now, I can't say if they'll accept file lockers, like file services anymore, but it is the same kind of thing. If they don't check what files are being uploaded to this service, they can't accept it as a vendor on Paddle either. Now, I think Paddle will probably make exceptions if you can prove that your service is generating AI images, but you're checking each of the results, for example, or you're generating AI images for a different use case. So let's say you have a blog article and the blog article generating AI images. Well, that depends then on the blog content, right? So I think it's going to be difficult to convince the risk team that you have all those things in place unless you are a larger company that has the means to check these things as well. So for indie developers with AI products, I think you're better off using a different vendor. But, This may change. This is probably something that they've debated internally a lot. And they are, as was said in the Paddle event, double checking rulings on certain AI vendors or AI products. But in general, this area has gotten a little bit harder to sell on Paddle. But there are other payment providers for exactly that reason that you can go ahead and try. And all in all, it's probably not Paddle defining these rules, but their payment providers in the bottom, and they don't really have a choice. Otherwise, they putting all the other vendors on the platform at risk as well. So it's not ideal, and I understand all the founders out there that have built products, and I've already been onboarded to Paddle, for example, and then had to be offboarded again recently. And that's not a good email to get or a good notification to get. But this is sort of my understanding of why this rule was put in place. Again, I don't exactly know behind the scenes what Paddle decided and why and what led to this, but this is probably a reasonable attempt at explaining the situation. That's all for today.